on the road to Emmaus. Now that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk?" They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you only a visitor to Jerusalem, and you do not know the things that have been happening there in these days?" "What things?" he asked. "About Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it is the 3rd day since all this took place. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning but didn't find his body. They came and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but him they did not see." Jesus said to them, "How foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets had spoken. Did not the Christ have to suffer these things and then enter his glory?" And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. As they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus acted as if he were going further, but they urged him strongly, "Stay with us, for it is an early evening. The day is almost over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. They asked each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures to us?" They got up and returned at once to Jerusalem. There they found the 11 and those with them assembled together and saying, "It is true, the Lord has risen and has appeared to Simon." Then the two told what had happened on the way and how Jesus was recognized by them when he broke the bread. This is the word of the Lord.
Well, we have been, for those who are new and visiting, we've been journeying through this theme, 7 sacred spaces. And that has enabled us to think about how we might use our building in future, and also how we might be a community together in the future. And both of those things are linked, and we've been exploring a bit about how those two things come together. And my belief is that our building, as we change it, as we adapt it, will affect the way that we are a community. One of the changes we made today was that we put the children on that side of the room first thing, and we've put tea and coffee together as one unity over there. Now, well, therein lies the story, doesn't it? So the posh could go over with the poor. There you go. So we're all going to be together, rich and poor, over drinking coffee and tea today, which is going to be no different in some ways. But there you go. Interesting, isn't it? How even positioning these things makes a difference to how we are as a community. Do you remember how a little while ago we went to the school on our Sunday mornings, and we used to do that on the first Sunday of each month, which is why that we have this service a bit later than the other service where there's another group of people that come. But do you remember how when we first went to the school, just being in that building changed the way that we related to each other, changed the way that we, who know each other well, suddenly kind of connected with each other. So there are gatherings when our building will change how we do our gatherings, but it will also give permission for things, I think, for things that we don't currently do. We don't do much with this space throughout the week. It's an empty space. We heat it for Thursday mornings, for communion, and it gets used sometimes in the middle of the weeks for music practice and for bands that come along. But pretty much this space remains empty. This most beautiful of spaces, the largest space outside the football ground, remains empty throughout the week. And I would love it, wouldn't you love it, if this space became filled right the way through the week, and it became animated by breath-filled people rather than inanimate wooden pews. This is part of our dream, but of course that's going to cost quite a bit of money, and so we need to make sure that we're hearing from God about what way forward we take this. And so this is a big concern for us. And we've been exploring how the 7 sacred spaces of a monastery reveal to us ideas about how we could function together as a community. So going back, we talked about chapel, the gathering together. Right in the centre of the monastery there is the chapel, the gathering together for worship. There's the refectory, eating together. There's the library, a place of learning and education. The cell, a place of personal relationship and connection with God in our secret, silent place. The garden, which is a place of work. Perhaps a better word for garden would be field, because the garden was the production place for a monastery. The chapter house, which is a place of decision making, which was a fresh one for me, and I hadn't really considered it. And then lastly, this week, we have Cloister. And you can see how these have different feelings or different expressions of us as a community. Worship, hospitality, learning, prayer, work, unity, which has been brought up again by Jackie this morning, which is so important for us as a community. And then lastly, Cloister, and I've given the tag friendship to Cloister. Imagine a cloister. This is the chapter house of Wells Cathedral. We looked at this last week. I've worked out that it actually has got 8 sides, not 7. That's the chapter house, the place where people made decisions together, the community made decisions. And here is the cloister of Wells Cathedral. And it's a square, and it goes round all the way round beside Wells Cathedral. Here's a different cathedral. This one's Salisbury Cathedral, amazing pointed tower right in the centre of Salisbury. And you can see that the cloister is a significant building on the edge of it. And it's a square, and it's enclosed. So the windows of a cloister on the inside, not the outside. And this marks them out as very different from normal buildings, where the windows are on the outside of the building. But a cloister has walls on the outside and windows on the inside. It is cloistered, which is, we get the word cloister, and we use the word cloister if we ever use. I don't know when I last used the word cloistered, but anyway, there you go. If you do use the word cloister, we're talking about it being protected or kind of enclosed or, with kind of withdrawn maybe a little bit. So I've put the two words together, protected friendship. And as I began to ponder on why there might be a space needed for protected relationship rather than always open relationship, that threw up all sorts of thoughts in my head. Think of your closest friends, the ones that jump to mind when you say the word friend, my best friends, the ones that are highest on your mobile phone, if you go to favourites, or the ones that are logs. They're the ones that your mobile phone tells you that you are phoning the most. It's always an interesting little kind of exercise to work out who your real friends are, because it tells you. It's kind of a log. It's a truth-telling log. You'll notice that your brother or your sister may be not very high up on the list, which is a bit disappointing. But your friends, those now, think of your relationships with them, and think of them being not just arriving out of the air, but them needing a bit of protection. A marriage is a protected friendship, isn't it? It's not an open, the windows are not pointing outwards on a marriage. The windows are on the inside. This is a protected, walled friendship for good reason, because it's the foundation of family life and all sorts of other things. And I think in the same way, just as for marriage, other friends actually need a bit of protection for them to work and to thrive and to blossom. The first thing I noticed, and it's in this story, and I'll just get the Bible, is that Jesus gives attention to these two walking along the road, who, although they're his friends, I imagine that he knew them quite well, they don't recognize him. But he gives them attention. So if you'd just like to look at Luke 24, verse 13. Now, the same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. And he asked them, "Why are you discussing together? What are you discussing together as you walk along?" And then it says they stood still. So having walked along, they suddenly come to a halt. He asks them a question, and it all comes to... I hadn't noticed this until I read this story again today, that the story has this bit of movement and then it stops. I'd imagined in my head that the story is just one long flowing kind of story. But Jesus' question brings them to a stop. It brings them to attention. They suddenly stand to attention. And they, what do you mean? And it comes to a halt. Jesus listens to their answer. Think of your friend, your friends, and think of your mobile phone on the table in front of you. Think of your laptop, the TV on in the corner, the kids running around. Think of music playing. Think of all sorts of the things that distract you from giving your friend your attention. Now, because you're good friends with them and you're in flow with them, you won't need them to pay attention to you intensely all the time. And yet you know the difference between someone who is paying you attention and someone for whom you are just one of the many distractions on their mind right now. And we are so attuned to this that we can tell. It is impossible for a vicar to look at his watch in a conversation with someone else whilst doing a visit of some kind without the person noticing. Have you ever tried to look at the clock or the watch or whatever it is without the person knowing that you are doing that right there and then? Do you know what I mean by that? It is impossible, no matter how subtle you do it or whatever you do. It is impossible to do it without noticing the time, even distracting them, pointing at things on the wall so you can have a quick look at the TV and look at the number under the TV. They know. People know whether you are tending to them or not. When I was 30, I had a birthday party. I've told this story before. And my friend was reminding me, we went to Paris this weekend, just Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Came back late last night to see Angus. And my friend who we stayed in Paris reminded me of the story that I had told him when I was at theological college about my 30th birthday. My 30th birthday, I had all my friends around, and my best man was comparing a bit of silly talk halfway through the evening, and trying to make fun of me and make me feel embarrassed. But he said, if Richard was an animal, what kind of animal would he be, and why? And write that down on a piece of paper. And then they went round the room. All 30 of them went round the room and told me what kind of animal I was. And we had a range of kind of jumpy, kind of extrovert, kind of bouncy kind of animals, as you can imagine. And then someone said giraffe. Giraffe. Why giraffe? Because whenever you're talking to him, he's looking over your shoulder and he's looking to see who else is in the room as well. Flip me, I don't want that one. This is my 30th birthday. But I remember that one above all the other bouncy, happy, cheerful animals that I was told about, because there was a truth about it. Now, part of it is because I'm trying to include. The reason I'm distracted is because I'm also trying to include trying to give my attention to more than one person, as opposed to just one person at a time. I'm trying to make sure that there's many people who are included. And if I see someone who, in the corner of my eye, who has been ignored by everyone else, I want to include them too. So that creates a tension within me. So it's not all bad, but you understand what it's like to talk to me, because you've experienced that too when I'm slightly looking. And you know, even though the eye movements are minuscule, that I may or may not be giving you my full attention. Sometimes we need to create relationship spaces which are protected away from distractions. The cloister is one of those spaces. What are the spiritual disciplines or the physical disciplines that you give yourself to give you and your friendships with the others in this church protected time where you are paying full attention to them? A formation group may be one of those instances, and you will discover, if you have tried to do a formation group, just how flipping hard it is to make that boundary and that border around that time. Creating protected, attentive time for a man and a woman in their marriage and for anyone else in their relationship with their friend is incredibly hard. But I recommend it, because it's in those moments that we are fully known. Now, notice that the people in the story were not paying full attention to Jesus. They did not recognize him until later on. Isn't that a metaphor for us sometimes? It's like we come here and we don't recognize each other. Or we're in our house group and we don't pay attention. Or we're in a friendship group and we lack the attentiveness that is required for true friendship. But in the monastery, there is this cloister, which I guess is a transition space between one thing and another, between the chapel and the refectory, the buzz of the refectory and the quietness of the chapel. But you might be in that story, in that journey between the two, giving someone your attention. Second one is journey. This is all written all the way through the story. Just go down a bit further. Verse 19. What things? Asked Jesus. About Jesus of Nazareth, they replied. He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and the rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it is the third day since all this took place. In addition, some of the women amazed us when they said that they went to the tomb early this morning, but they didn't find the body. They came and told us that they had seen a vision of angels and that he was alive. Verse 25, and he said to them, how foolish you are, how slow to heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Christ have to suffer these things? And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in the scriptures concerning himself. And then it kind of pauses between that and the next paragraph as they approach the village. So you get the sense that Jesus then took them from that place of stillness into the journey, and he just starts narrating. When I was a probation officer, I was encouraged, particularly with those who are hardest to engage with. Have you ever sat opposite someone? And this can happen in our closest relationships as well as like your children or like your husband or your wife or whoever, your parents. When you sit opposite them, it's a little bit intimidating and you don't connect very well. But to journey in a car with someone, with them next to you, is a very different experience. To go on a walk with someone is a much more opening and a good way of connecting with people. And so I was encouraged as a probation officer, particularly with those where I wasn't connecting, to take them to, I lived in Bristol, drive them to Bristol Suspension Bridge, just drive them somewhere and then drive back again, Just do something, because otherwise you'll never connect. You'll just hit that impasse. Now, we're all on a journey with Jesus, and we're on a journey with each other as well. And I think it's really good to be on a journey with each other. And I think it's really important that we see that the journey is not the destination. The destination isn't all that matters, that the journey is important. I was chatting to someone this week about a friend of theirs who has been grieving for the loss of someone that they loved very, very deeply. And I asked how they were doing, and they replied that they thought that she was doing okay, the grief was real, and some days were very bad, other days less bad, but she was in the process of grief, but it wasn't unexpected. And how are you with them, I said. How are you finding the relationship? Well, I'm walking with them in it, was the term she used. And there was a sense that the wisdom of this friend was that, of course, it's going to be a journey of progression. It's not going to be, she's not going to get over this bereavement. Of course, it's a journey. And of course, if I'm going to be her friend, I'm going to have to journey with her. Now that made me think about the cloister, or I thought about the cloister in this terms, in the sense that it is a transition. It doesn't exist for itself. You might say, meet me in the cloister. But mostly you'd be kind of walking through the cloister to somewhere else. And I was thinking, there is something about time spent in movement with other people that is good. I'm just wondering whether we need to go on more trips together, or walks together, or spend time in movement together rather than just sitting still together. If we need a minibus, we have one here. We could go anywhere, couldn't we, Ian? Yeah. And it's true, isn't it, Luke, that when you take your kids on the road to Laser Quest, sometimes it's the trip that is better than Laser Quest itself. The destination isn't always the best thing of the evening. It's the conversations you have on the way that are more enjoyable than the destination. So, journey. Next one, engagement. Jesus, I think, in this story is challenging to the people. Didn't you know? Don't you understand that the Christ had to suffer? And then, beginning from Moses, he engages with them. Very often in our friendships, the strongest friendships that we have, the ones that love us most will challenge us the most. They will engage with the reality of our situation and be honest with us. Why? Because they know that we know that they want the best for us, and so they're willing to take risks. This is difficult in every community, and is often why in our marriages these things are hard, because those people are most interested in our well-being, in our character, in our development, and they will be most truthful about ourselves and disappointed with our failures. But it's true for all our relationships, isn't it? That sometimes when you get close to someone, actually that's the point of engagement. Now, do you want disengaged relationships? No, you don't. You want engaged relationships. We even call it being engaged, don't we? The precursor to marriage. Now, I'm just wondering whether we're willing to be an engaged community, because engaged means that we nudge each other. And this week I was chatting to someone else, and I was saying, how far do you want me to go? All of Jesus is open to you. How much of him do you want? The answer was, I want all of him. And then the question was, well, do you want me to encourage you to get all of him, or do you want me to pull back if I see you going off on the left or the right? And he said, I want you to encourage me and to nudge me and to challenge me. I want you to engage me. Okay, you sure? Yeah. Okay, well, let's start right now. We turn to a passage. Or shall we remain superficial? Of course we don't want to remain superficial, but how many of our relationships in our community have remained at that superficial level rather than really nudging each other on to the character that we believe that God wants them to have? So I'm making steps in this myself, and I encourage you really in safe, protected spaces to engage with those who you're friends with. Again, that's why formation group is important. And lastly, receiving. If you look at the end of the story, as they approached the village, this is verse 28, if you've still got your Bible with you. As they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus acted as if he was going further, but they urged him strongly, "Stay with us, for it is nearly evening. The day is almost over." So he went in to stay with them. And then he took bread, and it was at that moment that they recognized him. There is something in a friendship about receiving. Over the last 2-3 days, I've been with Chris and Louise Maclay in Paris. He happens to be a vicar. We trained with him, and he's a vicar in Versailles. He's a chaplain for the English-speaking congregation in Versailles, on the edge of Paris. And I haven't seen him pretty much since college, so over 10 years. And yet they gave us everything. They picked us up from the airport. They welcomed us into their home. They have looked after Angus for the first 2-3 weeks of him staying in Paris and given him board and lodging. And they've blessed us. So that was a blessing enough. But then on this occasion, they just kept giving. And, do you need a trip down to town to get to the train station? This is what you do. They just kept giving us stuff. And it's quite difficult receiving things from other people. I don't know if you find that. It's actually quite difficult being on the receiving end of other people's hospitality. You want to even it out a bit, which is why we give flowers or chocolates or wine or stuff like that, just to make sure that we're all a little bit more the same. But they were overwhelming us with generosity. I have to say, it was lovely. It was amazing to be on the receiving end. I wonder with your friends, the ones that you want to go deep with, whether you should think, how can I receive from them? Not what can I do to give to them, but how can I receive from them? How can I let them show their love to me? It's an interesting thought, isn't it? As we're walking along the cloister, you might think, how can I let someone else come up to me and bless me? Receiving is an important part of this story. In fact, Jesus sent the disciples out, the 72 out, and he said, when you go out, find a person of peace, and then when you find that person, stay with them and receive from them as they give to you their food. It's a great evangelistic tool. You go to someone and then you let them feed you. Isn't that really interesting? Rather than feeding them, you let them feed you. Become a recipient of someone else's love. Why? Because when you do that, the connection between you becomes deeper and stronger. So here we are in this cloistered thing. Now, I don't know whether we're going to create a cloister between various bits of our building, but I wonder whether we could use this image of a cloister to think, how are we on journey with each other? Where are the protected moments of friendship where we journey together and we engage with one another and we receive from one another? Maybe we'll need to think on this. Just let that metaphor play out. Here are the 7 once again. We've journeyed through them and we're coming to the end and we're coming to land. I am praying that God will reshape more than the fabric. Although I'm confident that the reshaping of our fabric of the buildings will have a big impact on us as a community. But as we've gone through these things, I'm recognizing just that we need all of these things in us as a community. None of these things would we want to leave out. I wonder, of any of these, which is your least favorite? Which is the least important? Which one could you do without and the things still work? I wonder which is your most important, which one you think is the most important, the one that we've got to put most energy into right now as a church. Or for you personally, maybe.